This is Wittenoom, Australia, a city in the northern western part of the country. This part of Australia is extremely low in population, and that's why the city of Wittenoom, with only 20,000 people, is the most populated city in this part of the continent. Yes, only 20,000 people, and this shows us how empty this part of Australia really is. If you visit Wittenoom nowadays, it's pretty much a ghost town and you won't find a single person here. If you look at an updated version of the Australian official map, you can't even find the city of Wittenoom anymore. But why did the population leave and now it's a ghost town? Because the entire place is cancer. The dirt is cancer, the air is cancer, the water and everything else. And that's why they call Wittenoom the Chernobyl of Australia. What happened to this place? The story begins a century ago when a type of mine was found in Wittenoom. A company named CSR gets the rights to this mine and starts working here and investing a whole lot of money. They wanted to expand the mine, but the problem was in this part of the country there wasn't enough people, which is why they decided to build a city only 10 kilometers away from this mine. They located a land 10 kilometers away and built a whole lot of housing and things people need to live, like schools, hospitals, and etc. This is when they also named this brand new city Wittenoom. The people that lived here worked inside the mine, but they didn't magically appear over here because the company CSR put in an advertisement to bring people over here from the other parts of the country. You have to know, it's the 1940s and there's not a whole lot of jobs you can get in Australia, and there is not enough population. So when a job like this comes forward and they also give you housing, a lot of people decided to actually move out to this hellhole, which was extremely hot compared to other places. The material that these people were working with and the mine they worked at had this blue substance, and they liked it so much and it was so useful that you would find this everywhere. They would put it in their front lawn so it can compact it and have a proper driveway. They would put it in between their walls because it was a very effective insulation. Even the ground of the playground in the local school had this blue substance to soften it. Until now, everything is going well, but people didn't know that this blue material is asbestos. You have to know that asbestos is an extremely dangerous material for any living thing, humans and animals. But the asbestos that was being mined in the Wittenoom was blue asbestos, the most dangerous kind. If you look at asbestos underneath the microscope, you'll see tiny glass shards that are extremely sharp. These tiny particles very easily enter your lungs, and since they're like glass shards, they puncture into your lungs and stay there forever. If you're around asbestos for a long time, it will basically shut down the entire organ. First, it starts off with chest pains, trouble breathing, a very dry cough, and slowly your lungs goes towards failure. You have to know that since the 1930s, different scientists around the world have warned the population that asbestos is cancer and it will kill you. But it seems like there was too much lobbying around asbestos, and it was so cheap that they didn't allow news like this to go out to reach the public. When time reaches around World War II, the entire world is using asbestos everywhere. Even though 15 years ago scientists were warning the people, this material is an amazing insulation and it's cheap. That's why the people in charge did not want to give up such an amazing product. But the people didn't know what they're dealing with. Even the cigarette company Kent advertised their asbestos-filled cigarette filters.
Change to Kent with the Micronite filter.
You'll find that Kent's Micronite filter gives you high filtration.
Since we got to know asbestos a little bit, let's get back to Wittenoom and see what's going on. In the year 1948, a doctor in Australia named Eric Saint would go around the country to help people out, but this time he was going to Wittenoom. Even before Wittenoom landed with his aircraft inside Wittenoom, he already knew there was something wrong with this place because it was a black dust covering the entire city. It was kind of like it was polluted with smoke. When he landed and started walking around the town, it got even worse. This is when Dr. Saint tells the company CSR that you're killing these people with this type of mine, and you also have 20,000 people living right next to it. This is why he kind of puts in a word to the Australian government that this is happening and how this company is hurting all these people. But it seems like the corporate lobby went too deep with the asbestos because nobody cared and nobody did anything. Years later, they asked Dr. Saint if he was the only one that knew asbestos is bad for you. And he replied, no. Even the people that ran that filthy mine knew this was terrible for the environment. But they still went ahead because there was so much money in it. Years pass and the mine continues to work and nobody cares what the doctors say. And then another doctor comes along by the name of Jim McNulty. When Dr. McNulty entered the city of Wittenoom, he was devastated because all he said was that there was blue smoke everywhere. And when you went outside for 5 minutes, there was like black dust particles in your hair. Dr. McNulty also puts in a word to complain about the situation, but once again, nobody cared. Just like we said earlier, anybody that breathes in asbestos, it will be inside their lungs for the rest of their lives. Asbestos cannot be cleaned like dust particles in your lungs because your lungs have a self-cleaning system. But if the asbestos is in there, it will not get out, however many times it's cleaned out. Since the asbestos is like glass shards, they stick to the inside of the lungs and they will not be removed. And after many years, there will be an untreatable type of lung cancer named mesothelioma. After Dr. McNulty examined the people of the city of Wittenoom, he realized that there are more than 100 cases of people that have this untreatable lung cancer. But since the lobbying went too deep, the news did not get out that their fellow men that work in this mine have this type of cancer that's untreatable. And people continue to live in the city of Wittenoom. Eventually, in the year 1966, the mine is closed down. But that wasn't because of the safety of the population, but because of economical problems. When the mine closes, there wasn't a job left in Wittenoom, which is why immediately more than 50% of the population left. The rest of the people that stayed, nobody came along and told them, you're living in one of the worst places in the world and you will die of cancer if you stay here, which is why they continued living here for the next 12 years. And eventually, in the year 1978, the Australian government finally grew some beef and came along and told the people that you have to leave immediately because this is the most dangerous place to stay in. Just like we said, asbestos stays in the lungs for a very long time, and usually the effects are seen many years after exposure. And after years of closing down this mine, a lot of people came along and suffered respiratory problems because they lived in this city or worked in this filthy mine. More than 2,000 people died, and the 18,000 people that lived here had a lot of respiratory problems, and a lot of them died a painful death relating to their lungs, and a lot of people are still living with these issues. You can pretty much say the entire population of Wittenoom has respiratory problems. A lot of them died, a lot of them survived, but you could say the ones that survived wish they were the ones that died earlier, because now they're suffering from this filthy particle. Wittenoom is not radioactive like Chernobyl, but just like Chernobyl, if you stay there for a long time, you will face the consequences. You have to know that Western Australia is the least populated spot in the continent of Australia. And it wasn't just the Wittenoom mine that was asbestos. The entire left side of the country has these types of mines, which is why this area is called the most contaminated place in the world with asbestos. Eventually, in the year 2006, the Australian government decides to wipe off Wittenoom from their maps, and they cut electricity and removed every road sign that led to it. But the asbestos powder still remains. Right now in this forgotten town, there's more than 3 million tons of asbestos depoted, and it's also left out in the open, which is why 46,000 hectares around Wittenoom is a contaminated area, and there's warning signs everywhere. But since all that asbestos is on the outside, the 46,000 hectares is growing every year because all that contamination continues to grow and grow. It seems like the Australian government does not care about this area of the country, since there are a lot of native Australians that have been living in this area for thousands of years without a problem. Experts believe that it will take between 100 to 600 Australian dollars for this place to clean up, but the government has no plan on doing so. The natives are extremely upset, and they believe that the government does not care for them.